Over the weekend, after 14 years of brutal reign, the murderous dictator Bashar al-Assad was finally toppled. And this is what it looked like after he, being the coward he is, scampered off to Moscow to seek asylum with his buddy Vladimir Putin.
This is an extraordinary moment, a seismic change in Syria's balance of power. The strong man of Damascus, Bashar al-Assad, is gone. Rebels have declared victory. We were the first Western journalists to reach the capital just hours after it fell.
This is where people are celebrating in the central Umayyad Square. Civilians and rebels, you can hear the sound of celebratory gunfire. People are driving around in their cars. They're giving me peace signs. They're saying that life is going to be so much better now that Bashar al-Assad is gone. But there is a mix of joy and fear in the city. There are those who supported Bashar al-Assad, who felt they were protected by him, and now they're wondering what is going to happen.
This development, especially in light of the fact that Donald Trump is going to be coming back into the White House at the end of January, will have serious consequences for the Western Alliance and the way Donald aligns himself with other world leaders. But first, I want to take a look at an interview that Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, had with CNN's Christian Amanpour. Merkel recently wrote a book called Freedom. And in it, she details her 16 years of experience working with world leaders, including, of course, Donald. Donald, she claims, snubbed her by refusing to shake her hands the first time they met. And throughout the 4 years she had to deal with him on the world stage, not only his behavior was weird, but she also had this to say, quote, the way he spoke about Putin, the way he spoke about the North Korean leader, that there was always a kind of fascination with the sheer power and what these people do. This is nothing new. We've heard this before. The evidence keeps piling up that Donald has a fixation with an admiration for dictators, largely because he was raised by one and also because he wants to be one. However, the parallels that were made in the past are becoming more and more clear the closer Donald gets to be coming back into power. The regimes and the dictators that lead them sometimes seem like comic book villains, but it's not just Putin that Donald is fascinated with. He aligns himself with totalitarian dictators like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, Viktor Orban of Hungary, and Jair Bolsonaro, and several others who run their countries like serfdoms. Donald has every interest in accruing the kind of power these evil men wield over America and United States citizens. If you don't believe me, let's just take a look at how Donald deals with other dictators around the world. On December 2nd, the Argentinian president, Javier Milei, who shares a very similar ideology to Donald's and is eager to dismantle his country's democracy, held a conservative action political conference in which many of Donald's inner circle showed up, including the completely useless Lara Trump. Bolsonaro's son was a guest speaker, as were Steve Bannon and other Donald loyalists. These people met literally to discuss world domination while dancing to a song about gay men having sex in the showers at the YMCA. This is one of many similar meetups that have occurred over the last decade, and we sort of lost sight of what they may or may not mean because there have been so many of them, and it's hard to put them in perspective. But the truth of the matter is what's going on is there's a malign purpose here to weaken democracy worldwide. Unfortunately, the greatest threat to what was until recently the greatest democracy in world history is Donald Trump, who, thanks to a plurality of American voters, is heading back to the White House at the end of January. So let's revisit the aforementioned Viktor Orban of Hungary. American Republicans love Orban, and Donald name checks him all the time as somebody he admires, but also as somebody who admires Donald. On one of last week's episodes of The Readout, Joy Reid said, quote, Orban has gone out of his way to stoke divisions by spreading fear about racial diversity and demonizing immigrants, unquote. Sound familiar? When Orban came to power in 2020, By the way, he was democratically elected, so that is not a safeguard against anything. He immediately attacked Hungary's judiciary and news media. Then he consolidated power over both of them. He tightened his grip over Hungary's electoral systems. He refers to refugees from the Middle East as, quote, Muslim invaders, unquote. He offered tax breaks to boost the Hungarian birth rate. He's passed laws prioritizing, quote unquote, patriotic education, and he controls Hungary's state universities. He's also passed laws banning LGBTQ plus content in schools and on TV. Kim Lane Shepley explains.
Orban is actually modeling for the Republican Party in the U.S. how you can actually lead with culture wars and wind up with dictatorship.
Kim Lane Shepley is a Princeton professor who worked in Hungary's constitutional court in the 1990s and has studied Hungarian constitutional law ever since. She says Orban might be Europe's longest-serving head of government, but became so by changing the constitution and gerrymandering districts to ensure one-party control.
The last free and fair election in Hungary was in 2010. He's since rigged all the other elections. So he doesn't have the whole country behind him, but he will look like a great success because he wins elections overwhelmingly, which he does because he got to write all the rules.
Donald's relationship with Russia's Vladimir Putin is slightly more complicated. To an objective observer, it seems pretty obvious that Putin is the one with the control in this relationship. And despite the fact that Donald wants to be a strongman, he does definitely act like a beta when he's around Putin and has always done Putin's bidding, which is, again, why developments in wake of Assad's fall in Syria are going to be so interesting and perhaps complicated. So Putin likes nothing more than power, control, and money. He's reported to be one of the, if not the richest person in the world. And Donald has definitely learned the importance of divisive personality cult from Vladimir because much like Donald has divided America against itself, Putin has done the same in his own country. It's also worth pointing out that a lot of the division in America has been created by Russia. That brings us to North Korea and totalitarian dictator Kim Jong-un. In 2020, Donald claimed that, quote, he wrote me more beautiful letters and I am in love, unquote, which is something that could only be said by somebody who does not know what love is. Apparently, they exchanged over 25, quote unquote, love letters. But to what end, I do not know. Kim may be put on trial for crimes against humanity as his country starves its own people, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that Kim Jong-un will never put himself in a position to be arrested. Watch this clip of Donald talking about Kim Jong-un and see what you think.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
they talked about that yesterday.
I would
with
have him. Yeah, I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone think anything different. Right. He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Jair Bolsonaro, former president of Brazil, also known as Trump of the Tropics, is being investigated for inciting an uprising against his own government after thousands of his supporters stormed government buildings. Sound familiar? He's barred from running for president again until 2030. Why? Because he abused his power. And also because apparently Brazil is a stronger, better functioning democracy than the United States of America. Let's take a look that explains Bolsonaro at his worst moments.
Been in the French far right for most of his political career and was known more for outrageous statements than political achievements.
Através do voto, você não vai mudar nada nesse país. Nada, absolutamente nada. Você só vai mudar, infelizmente, quando um dia nós partimos para uma guerra civil aqui dentro. E fazendo um trabalho que o regime militar não fez. Matamos 30 mil.
In one infamous episode in 2003, he had an argument with a fellow congresswoman who accused him of promoting violence.
Olha, jamais isso pra você que você não merece.
Olha, eu espero que não.
Se é esse o papo, dá, eu te dou outra. Dá que eu te dou outra. Dá que eu te dou outra. Dá que eu te dou outra. Agora, gostar de homossexual? Vai lá, ninguém gosta, ok? Ninguém gosta, a gente suporta.
In 2017, as he was toying with a presidential run, he managed to take aim at several groups in one statement alone.
Se eu chegar lá, não vai ter dinheiro pra ONG. Esses inúteis vão ter que trabalhar. Não vai ter 1 centímetro de
In 2018, Bolsonaro won the presidential elections by vowing to crack down on crime. Since taking office, he's made it easier to own guns. He's given police a green light to respond more violently to suspects.
Then we head over to Argentina, which is currently being run by Javier Milei, who's described as a right-wing populist, which basically means that he thinks that private companies should own all of the property, and property can extend to owning human beings. He's recently been rubbing elbows with Musk and Ramaswamy, and because of his stance on the economy, which is essentially his right to raid the treasury, Donald loves him too. China's Xi Jinping is an authoritarian. Now, Donald and Xi's relationship soured in the wake of Donald's tariff threats, and Chinese-American relations haven't been very good for a while because China does not want to be contained by the United States. It's a very competitive relationship, and in the past, Donald has been seen following Jinping around because of Xi's power and how he rules his country as an authoritarian.
I know him very well. I've dealt with him many times. He came at Mar-a-Lago, as you know. He stayed.
Well, he's not a friend of the United States, I don't think.
No. He doesn't hate the United States, but he loves China. He wants to take everything away from the United States. He wants to not destroy the United States. He just wants everything.
He's been compared to Mao Zedong, and he is unmistakably the central figure of his government by design. Xi loves censorship. The government owns the media, and you are not allowed in China to write anything about the Chinese government or you will be thrown in jail. Last stop is India's Narendra Modi. He's a bit of a voyeur. He likes it when government agencies monitor all mobile phones, landlines, internet communications, etc. And India has been quoted as being a cyber gulag of total digital surveillance. Now, there are many, many more dictators Donald will undoubtedly try to cozy up to once he's back in power. But the writing's on the wall, where it's pretty clear what's going on here. Authoritarian dictators and extraordinarily powerful, insane people are gaining more and more power because people like Donald Trump are getting into power, and there is nothing to stop them. The Western alliance is very fragile. Let's look at what Donald told us on the campaign trail about what he wants to do.
Trump was talking about America as an occupied country, and he was going to liberate it. And also, in the past, talking about using the military on Americans. This comes out of fascism and also the tradition of military dictatorships like Pinochet in Chile. So it's a purely authoritarian spectacle that we saw.
Did we respond? Well, we did, kind of. A plurality of people put it back in the White House. But look at this authoritarian rhetoric.
President Putin was very, very strong. He even called me brilliant. Isn't that nice? Putin has much better leadership qualities than Obama. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. Kim Jong-un, he really has been very open, I think very honorable. He's the boss. It's incredible. He wiped out the uncle. He wiped out this one, that one. And then we fell in love. He wrote me beautiful letters.
Kim is a brutal dictator. He runs a police state, forced starvation, labor camps. He's assassinating members of his own family. How do you trust a killer like that?
I met him. I've spoken with him. I think that he really wants to do a great job for North Korea. His country does love him. They have a great fervor. I like the Saudis. They're very nice. I make a lot of money with them. They buy all sorts of my stuff, all kinds of toys from Trump. They pay me millions and hundreds of millions. And I get along great with all of them.
Just a quick checklist. Fascists disdain democratic principles, and Donald is trying to break up the federal government. They tolerate or promote violence. Just look at January 6th. They have a heated mass base that supports their anti-democratic thinking. Just look at MAGA. They scapegoat and support the persecution of very vulnerable groups like immigrants, LGBTQ plus community, women, etc. And they are led by a charismatic individual who exhibits and normalizes all of the above. That would be Donald, whether you think he's charismatic or not, he is. So what can we do? Well, we need to stop resorting to easy explanations about the rise of the far right, and we need to stop them from taking all of our power by building our own united front. We need to unite and speak out on important issues like climate change, That affects all of us while promoting gender equality and racial equality. We need to defend human rights and democratic values fiercely by aggressively championing persecuted groups on local, state, and federal and international levels. We need to do all of those things. We also need to take appropriate steps to counter civil unrest and violence. We need basically to be prepared. It may be too late to ask the question, is Donald following in these authoritarian dictators' footsteps, as Joy Reid asked on Tuesday, because we already know the answer, and it is unfortunately yes.